Hiya and welcome to the next episode of this small series of equine skeletal system for the horse owner, and hopefully this will give you a little glimpse below the skin and maybe just take a look at what you see on the outside. I'm going to explain what's on the inside. So today we're going to be talking about the limbs of the horse, and I'm going to start off with the front limb. So at the start we have the scapula, or what you may know as the shoulder, and we have the cartilage which runs along the top of the scapula, and then we have this bony prominence which we call the spine of the scapula. So you can see here, and often as an owner you can run your hand across the shoulder and you can just feel this bony part here, and it will tell you you're sort of in the middle of the shoulder. The scapula then will take an angle, and then we will have the humerus, which slots in like this on a ball and socket joint here. We then come down, and then we come into the radius, and you can see here we have a bony prominence on here, and this is what we call the ulna, and you will feel the top part here as your horse's elbow. Often this bone is referred to as the forearm in layman terms. The next bone we come on to is a series of small bones, and we call it the carpal, or it's equivalent to the human wrist, and you will know this as the knee. But you can see here it's made up of quite a lot of bones, and if this was in a real horse, all these bones would come apart if you were dissecting. And then at the end of here, sticking out, we have the accessory carpal bone. And then below the knee, we have what we call the metacarpal bone, or you will know this as the cannon bone. So we have these splint bones here, which can often add a little bit more support to the knee. And then we have at the bottom here, the sesamoids, which creates a groove for soft tissue to run through. And then below here, we have the long pastern bone, and this between here and here, so the cannon bone and the long pastern bone, you will know as a fetlock. And often you can feel these, and sometimes they're a little bit like sort of sticky if the horse maybe have had an injury and not moving as much. And then we come down to the short pastern bone, and in between the long and the short pastern bone, you will know this as the pastern. And this will disappear into the hoof. And then we will have the coffin bone, or what you will know as the pedal bone. And at the back of here, we will have the navicular. So we're just going to move on to the hind limb. And I've talked about the pelvis and the femur before. So off the pelvis, we have the femur. And again, it's connected by a ball and socket joint. And we will call this the hip. And then at the base of the femur, we have the tibia, and we have the fibula, which runs off here. And then at the front, we have what we call the stifle joint, and this is the patella, or the knee. I'll show you this in more detail on the other skeleton. And then as we come down from the tibia, we have the tarsal bones, or what you may know as the hock. And there's many bones in here again, and they have a slide and glide. They have lots of different actions. This is what you will see poking out on your horse. So this is what you may recognize as the hock. And then below that, we then becomes very similar to the front limb. So in the front we call it carpal or carpus, and in the front we call it tarsal or tarsus. So this, instead of the metacarpal, is called the metatarsal. And again, we have the sesamoids at the bottom for the connection for the soft tissue to slide through. And then we come very similar again, as we have the long pastern bone, which at the top between the metatarsal and this you will know as the fetlock. We then have the short pastern bone again, which you will know as the pastern, and then it disappears off into the hoof. And then we have the coffin bone or the pedal bone, and then we have the navicular there. So as what this looks like on a whole limb, so I haven't got the scapula for this one because it's attached to the rib cage. You can see here how the ulna comes away, and this is what you will feel on your horse as the elbow. And then this is the accessory carpal bone. It's quite deep, and often you'll see me fiddling about with his to make sure that the movement around here is okay. But if you think of the knee as the wrist, so it's quite provides quite a lot of mobility for the rest of the horse, and why it's important that knees and hocks stay in good health. And then on the hind limb, you can see the big femur bone. You can see here in more detail how the fibula is quite a small bone. And then you can see that patella bone at the front here. So we'll just get the patella again in large. You can see here, and then you can see that patella here. And this is where often we'll slide round and we'll make sure that that joint is okay. And then you can see here, this is what you will recognize as the hock. And often, again, if I'm assessing a horse, I will make sure that there's no swelling on the inside or the outside, make sure there's no puffiness, and we might want to just call in your vet just to make sure that everything's okay, because the hock and the stifle are so interlinked. If one is dysfunctional, the other one's going to be dysfunctional, and it's a bit like a chicken and egg of what came first. But for me, it doesn't matter what came first, because if this is not working right, this will not be working right, this is not working right, this is not working right. So yeah, so I hope this helps with just understanding, and I'm just going to run through them all again. So on the front limb, we have the scapula at the top. We then come down at an angle to the humerus, the scapula, and so it'll be like this. We then come down to the radius. We then come down to the carpal or the knee. We then have the metacarpal or the cannon bone. And then we have the long pastern, the short pastern, and then finally the coffin bone or the pedal bone. And on the hind limb, we have the femur. We then have the tibia and the small fibula. And at the front, we have the patella or the knee. We then have the hock or the tarsal. So this is equivalent to the human ankle. And obviously the front is equivalent to the human wrist. And then we have the metatarsal, the long pastern bone, the short pastern bone, and again we have the coffin bone or the pedal bone. So when we break it down, I think sometimes when you're learning, we tend to look at everything. And if we break it down into sections, just so we can repeat and understand, because that's often how I find when I'm learning, I have to keep repeating the word. It just sinks in a little bit more. And I often say, try not to move on to the next thing until you've remembered all of these. So when you break it down into one limb, and yeah, when I've sat with a bag of 4 legs trying to figure out which goes in where, even I get confused. But if we just break it down to one limb per thing and then think of it like this, like I always think of the bone coming off the pelvis, the femur, and then we want that zigzag angle as we come down, and then we finally come down into the limb. And same with the scapula, we want this, and then this, and then as we finally come down to the limb. So I hope this helps. The next one is going to be about the head, and some interesting points with that. Bye.